Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Hope you guys well. Now we are from Group 8. We would like to explain about the US and China trade war and its impact toward the East Asian region. So first, I'm going to tell you guys about the brief history of the China and the US trade war. The China and the United States trade war is an ongoing economic conflict between the world's two largest national economies and the world's two superpowers. For your information, this conflict has its roots in the early 20s when the American politicians and the economists started complaining about the US trade deficit with China. The US accusing China of wrongdoing as far as the US trade deficit is concerned, based on the three prepositions. The first one is that the yuan is undervalued against the dollar. The second one is that the trade deficit is caused by the currency undervaluations. And then the third one is that the China's trade and exchange rate policies are illegal, or at least immoral, because designed to promote the China's export and obstruct. And then on May 2018, the Trump administration announced sweeping tariff on China's imports, worth at least $50 billion in response to what the White House alleges China thieved the US technology and intellectual property. Coming on the heels of the tariff on the steel and aluminum imports, the measures target goods including clothing, shoes, and the electronic, and restrict some China's investment in the United States. China imposed retaliatory measures in early April on the range of US products, shocking the concerns of the trade war between the world's largest economies. On July 6, 2018, the US and China trade war escalates. The Trump administration imposes fresh tariff totaling $34 worth of the Chinese goods. More than 800 Chinese products in the industrial and the transport sectors, as well as goods such as televisions and medical devices, will face a 25% import tax. China retaliates with its own tariff on more than 500 of US products. The reprisal also valued around $34 billion target commodities such as beef, dairy, seafood, and soybeans. President Trump and the members of his administration believe that China is ripping off the United States, taking the advantage of free trade rules to the detriment of US firms operating in China. And then Beijing criticized the Trump administration's move as the trade bullying and cautions that the tariff will trigger the global market unrest. As we all know that the trade war has its own impacts, and now Faiz will explain about the impact of trade war in the China region.
Okay, now the sessions of the trade war impact towards the China. As we know that the China itself is one of main actor in this trade war with the United States. Especially China has a big role at causing impact in East Asia. Okay, so what happened in China? So in China, China's economic growth this year is believed that to be the slowest since 1992. The National Education Finance and Development (NIFD), a Beijing-based think tank, so it is research institutions, recently predicted that China's economic growth rate would even slow below 6% to 5.8% in 2020. So it means that this year has been predicted from the previous years. From an estimated 6.1% this year, this is the below China's target range of 6 to 6.5% growth for 2019. And it is indicates further downward pressure on the China's economy. In the first half of 2019, last year, China's GDP growth rate was 6.3%. In terms of total volume, GDP growth was in line with the 6 to 6.5% proposed by the government's at the beginning of the year. So the trade war, it is threatens to reverse these decades old trends, and it is put downward pressure on the China's economic growth because we know that from the news there is so many sanction or U.S. policy that makes a new burden for the China's economy. And the average tariffs levied on China's goods have risen from 3% in January 2018 to over 20% in September 2019, and could cover all China's export in December if the two sides fail to reach a phase one detail. China's rapid economic growth in the last several decades would not have been possible without the influx from the foreign direct investment. Because as we know and as we understand from the international relations is that none of country in the world could survive without any investment from the foreign country. Then we will talk about the impact on the China's economy. Here I want to explain several impact that causing the damage towards the China's economy. First is the U.S.-China trading relationship is arguable the most important one in the world, with the bilateral trading volumes amount to over 600 billion US dollar in 2017, according to World Integrated Trade Solutions or WITS. While US government has enacted protectionist measures against the number of countries, its most concerted actions have been targeted at China. This leading China to respond with its own set of restrictions. This bilateral trade friction have generated spillovers in multiple dimensions, from the shifting of global supply chains to shock in international stock markets and even fears a global recessions. Then the China export more goods to the US than to any other country in the world. So mean that those exports have dropped by more than 12% this year because the China uh, make US as the uh, reliable country. So about the other impact is Chinese government has many more tools is in disposal to alleviate some of the trade wars pressure. Then the central government recently slashed tax on business and corporation to help uh, cushion the blow of from the impact of the trade war itself. And the government also devalued its currency so that China's goods were cheaper than the previous circumstance before the trade war, and thus would be more attractive to trade partners around the world. Then China's export fell in November as shipment to the US slowed sharply, adding to concern about the effect of the two relations of the trade war. So means that the relations in the trading in China it is uh, decrease the quality of China's economy. And now we will talk about uh, how the China responds towards the trade war, especially the policy that made by China. And here I want to underline one of the many policy that has undertaken by China's government. The first is the Chinese government's extensive efforts to censor news about the trade war further illustrate the concern with the public opinion on this issue. Means that as the authoritarian state, the government of China has a control over the media, or in simply speaking, the government of China supervise the content of the media in around the China's region about the trade war, so that the information that delivered to the public it is has been passing through the filter that made by the Chinese government. Then the China central government requests input from the public on how it should respond to Trump's tariff threats and justified its decisions to retaliate with tariff on its sides. Uh, means that this policy is as the authoritarian state, China's still have more insight from the its public, especially from the academician, from the scientists in China that have been mastering at the economic stuff. And the next is the China's policy response to the trade war seems to be at least partially influenced by public attitudes on this issue. Means that in this policy, China's government is underlines about how the public behavior, the public attitudes that becomes high consider valuable that can be undertaken by the Chinese government. And the last is uh, the raise tariff on $60 billion of US goods from 1st June 2019. And it is extending a bilateral trade war. As we can see that in the previous years, trade war between the US and China has been uh, have several meetings that uh, cool that make cool situations among them, and it is also bring the good impact. I mean, it is a better impact than the previous event in the trade war that have bring bad impact to the world. Okay, the next sessions would be explained by Pasha about the impact towards Taiwan and Hong Kong.
So, US-China trade war and its impact to Taiwan. Taiwan's economy has historically relied heavily on China's collaboration, with 40% of Taiwan's export going to the mainland. Due to the mainland's increasing labor wages, flexible rules, and uncertain central government policy, Taiwanese companies have been presented a dilemma: either to move back to Taiwan and seek assistance from its government, or to diversify its portfolio of trade partners in the region. Not only are Taiwan businesses in mainland China expected to suffer in the trade war, the Taiwanese economy has been greatly influenced. Some scholars expect Taiwan's economy to lose in the long term. They argue that the trade war caused reduction in demand and the shrinking of market demand, both of which will eventually slow Taiwan's economy. Moreover, some scholars have argued that trade war may have positive influence on Taiwan's economy because it is expected to increase wages, job opportunities, housing prices, and consumer good prices, and lower exchange rates in the face of an expected slight drop in the overall economic growth rate. However, under the trade war and US protectionism, there has been a steady drop in Taiwan's export to China, which has a negative impact on the GDP growth of Taiwan. Some, some of Taiwan's key industries have been directly impacted by the ongoing US-China trade war, such as textiles, shoemaking, personal computers and electronics, and integrated circuits. Their responses to the trade tension have largely been determined by market access and labor costs. As China gradually tightens its environmental regulation and raises the labor standards, those making and textile enterprises have relocated to Southeast Asia and Mexico to keep production costs low. Such move coincide with the Thai-Inland government's new southbound policy, as well as the comprehensive and progressive agreement on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Still, such companies made their decision before the US-China trade friction flare up. Taiwan may help protect itself from harm by identifying which sectors are actually hurt by the trade war because of the fact that 80% of Taiwanese companies operating in China produce intermediate goods. It is not certain whether these goods are being produced for China consumption or if they're being produced in China and then sold by China to the American market. Taiwan has already begun to lay the groundwork for portfolio diversification in the region with its new sovereign policy or NSP. NSP is Taiwan's regional relations building plan with 10 ASEAN countries, 6 South Asian nations, Australia, and New Zealand. It has already demonstrated that many other international markets are interested in enhancing and strengthening the depth of business relations with Taiwan. Taiwan's position within the trade war and how it can preserve its economic well-being by explaining that bilateral trade friction between China and the United States might actually lead to the NSP's success and Taiwan gaining more trade partners. And the next is US and China trade war, its impact to Hong Kong. Hong Kong is shrouded by U.S. deal called the United States-Hong Kong Policy X, which means the country has treated the city separately from China in terms of trade export and economic since the return of its sovereignty from Britain to China in 1997. Hong Kong has served as the focal point for U.S. investments intended for China and from China to the U.S. Chinese companies rely quietly heavily on Hong Kong's financial market to raise the capital. At the beginning of the trade war, nearly 70% of all Chinese export to the U.S. passed through Hong Kong. Hong Kong sees itself losing out on the revenues owing to this trade war, as these tariffs show no sign of being abolished. The continuing protests have clashed between protesters and the police in the city in that massive capital fight. Back in March, the administration in Hong Kong and the Chinese government signed an extradition agreement that was considered a violation of human rights. Instead, protesters have filled Hong Kong streets, which is finally beginning to show in its impact to economic conditions. In response to that, U.S. government signing a human rights act expressing moral support for protesters in Hong Kong. The negotiations are expected to hit a wall as well. The Chinese have expressly told the U.S. to stay out of Hong Kong, showing that tensions are running high again between the two superpowers, which could have greater economic consequences. And the next is U.S. and China trade war and its impact to Japan.
So I will continue the presentation. I will explain about the impact of trade war between US and China towards Japan. The nature of trade war and multinational production linkages across countries means the impact has been felt far beyond these two countries. The trade war between the US and China had an impact between other countries, including Japan, one of the most important trading partners of both countries. So there are several impacts towards Japan. I will explain it one by one. The first one is the impact to multinational corporation or MNC in Japan. So Japan, as the world's third largest economy and one of the most important trading partners of both countries, US and China, firms have been negatively affected by the trade war. The impact on Japan multinational corporation or MNCs illustrate how the trade wars affect ripple along the global values chain. The operation in China's of Japan's MNCs have been negatively affected by the trade war, especially when China's affiliates rely heavily on trade with North America. This led to a reduction of their stock price. The impact is amplified when the China's affiliates are more integrated in the value chain of the MNCs if they have a higher import share from Japan. Also, about 20% of Japan export go to China, but the export in China fell in the first 6 months of the year due to China's economic slowdown. So some Japanese companies shift their production elsewhere to avoid the tariff. The first one is Ricoh. So the precious equipment maker Ricoh says it shift production of US-bound products to Thailand from China. Ricoh officially say output in Thailand has increased by about 10%. The next one is Mitsubishi and also Daikin Industries. So Mitsubishi Electric and Daikin Industries are two other companies following a similar strategy. Mitsubishi moved some manufacture of semiconductors and Daikin also turned to Thailand to replace China as the production base for compressor used in the air conditioner. The next impact is the impact to the Japanese export. So Japan continues to experience a decline in the export. In April 2019, it was reported that the decline in the value of Japanese export were 2.4% in April from the previous year. This decline was deeper than the economics expected by 1.6%. This decline was dragged down by the export of auto parts and semiconductor equipment. A number of countries whose economy, such as Japan, has been hit hard by the US import tax on China. However, when viewed on a country-by-country basis, the level of Japanese export to the US rose 8.4% in the first 7 months of 2019. This condition was supported by the export of semiconductor production, equipment, construction machinery, and also mining, as well as aircraft. So in addition to the side negative effect of the trade war, on the other hand, this upheaval actually strengthened the value of the Japanese currency called yen. So the Japanese yen was able to rise again despite the decision of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, to postpone tariff on a number of goods from the China managed to restore the attractiveness of risky assets. So the exchange rate of yen was observed to strengthen 0.21% or 0.20% to the level of 105.47 per US dollar. So because of this yen is considered as a safe haven asset. Therefore, this yen is often hunted by the investor amid condition of geopolitical concern and uncertainty. So the next presentation will be presented by my friend.
So next, the impact trade war on South Korea. The South Korean economy is highly exposed to ongoing global trade. The latest growth in figures show how disputes between the United States and China affect the economic performance on these two countries. First impact is economic growth. Slow even though export performance showed signs of recovery, because the overall economic outlook which is still overshadowed by slowing domestic spending and increasing intensive global trade friction. And the second impact is the value of the South Korea currency was slightly reduced bond and the stock price and down in the early opening of the trade. Due to its current economic condition, the South Korea government has responded with additional stimulus plan of $5 billion. And the third impact is export down 50% in October from the previous year, driven by a decrease in the semiconductor, the petrochemical export. While South Korea export activity declined to 11 months, import performance was also reported to have fallen by 50% and the trade surplus reaches $5 billion. Some South Korean industries have taken a direct hit. For example, South Korea petrochemical companies, which rely on China for 47.5% of their export, witnessed a decline in export to China by 7.2% last year and had to settle for $22.78 billion. Their export to China are likely to decline this year. As the world leading producer of memory chips going into consumer electronics such as cell phone and computers, South Korea benefits from years of rapid and consistent growth in the global smartphone market. But global demand for smartphones has flattened. That combined with slowdown in China and established global growth, has the heart of Korea's export-driven economy. In April, South Korea export declined for the fifth consecutive month, falling 2% compared to the same period a year earlier. South Korea economy was already going down the wrong path, but the latest escalation in the trade war really puts a spinner obstacle in the world.
Okay, for the conclusion, historically speaking, trade wars have usually resulted in more losses than gain for involved countries. And in the minority of cases, trade wars can lead to world-changing consequences. The US and China trade war disrupt the flow of trade between the countries. This makes the economic flow in the developing countries in East Asia and the Pacific slow down. And then it has the potential for export withdrawal in a number of Asian countries. This trade war also have the possibility of diversions of investment on the third country. That's all from our group discussions today. Thank you for your nice attention. See you in the next semester.